This is Lauren Greci, and you're listening to the Go and Tell podcast. Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Go and Tell podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Greci, and today I have Lisa Hernandez. So, Lisa, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to all the listeners and viewers?
Thank you, Lauren. My name is Lisa Hernandez. I know Lauren from school. We used to go to middle school and high school together. I am living in Carrollton. I'm about to enter my 15th year teaching. I teach, I teach currently at an all-boys school in Irving. I have my bachelor's and my master's degrees in Spanish. And I have been married, let's see here now, oh goodness, 15 years as well. And I have two daughters, one that's 12 and then another one that just turned 8.
Wow. Okay. I have so many things with the all boys school because I have two boys and then you have two girls. So how is that going from like mothering two girls and teaching at an all boys school? Like you kind of get a little bit of both, but you are bombarded by boys.
Oh yeah, it's different. You know what? I find that it really balances my life, and I find that it helps me understand, because if you are only with girls or only with boys, you don't always get to see the full scope of things, whether it's that you're teaching or parenting. And so, I didn't get to have sons of my own. So this is kind of my way of being able to, help form young men. And I actually started teaching at a co-ed school. So that was my first experience with high school, and I loved it. But I was just looking for different opportunities, and that's when I ended up where I'm at now. Boys are definitely different, and different energy level, have to be spoken to in a different way, receive information in a different way, learn in a different way. So I really like it. I find that there's not as much drama per se, although they love to make little drama amongst themselves.
Yes.
But I really enjoy it. And I think, you know what, it's funny because some people have different reactions when they find out that I teach high school or that I teach at a boys' school. And I think all teachers are inherently different, because I think elementary school teachers, they can't imagine themselves teaching middle school. Or if somebody's at an all boys school, they're like, I could never do an all girls school. I think everybody's temperament's different. But I love that I feel like I have a sense of balance in my life because I have my daughters at home, but then I also, when I go to work, not only is it that it's all boys, it's mostly male colleagues too. So yeah,
true.
so and that's very different too, because most schools, it's predominantly women that are teachers. So yeah, I kind of have a different experience at home versus at work.
Yeah, no kidding. I love it. Whenever I was, I think it was probably like early high school, I started teaching at a daycare, and that was like my first introduction to like kids and boys and girls and like the preschool age. And then when I decided I wanted to teach, it was so funny. I was adamant. I was like, middle school only. I only want to teach middle school. And like you were saying, people were like, oh my gosh, I could never do middle school. I'm like, well, I could never do first grade. Like, but then here I am homeschooling a second grader. So, I mean, we are capable.
Well, we've all adapted, right? This last year, we've all learned things about ourselves. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to high school. So I know that you shared that, yes, we did go to middle school and high school together. So what was high school, middle school like for you? Like, do you look back on it fondly, or are you kind of like, I'm glad we're out of that? Or
so I don't look back on middle school super fondly. That was a really difficult time in my life, and just some different things I was going through. It was funny because for me, academics was always fairly easy, and I made friends fairly easily, but I just still had a lot of internal struggles that I think are normal for adolescent girls to go through, but I didn't really have a big support network to help me process that. Not like I think we approach mental health completely differently nowadays. And we were talking earlier about boys and girls. It's like, oh yeah, I have an adolescent daughter. Like I remember what that was like. So I try to be understanding. So middle school was it had its ups and downs. And then high school was great. I mean, I really liked high school. I had a job and I was involved in all kinds of extracurriculars. And I think I kind of, I foolishly had a plan for my life of what I wanted to do and where I saw myself. And of course, maybe 10% of that actually happened. Um, but yeah, high school was good. I always enjoyed school, and I try to, encourage my children in school. So yeah.
Yeah. What was one of your favorite extracurriculars that you did?
Um, okay. It's hard to pick just one. But I think the one that probably had the most impact on me was I joined the newspaper staff when I was in 10th
Mhm.
grade. And then by senior year, I was the editor of the paper. And that set me up to have an internship with the Allen American, which is now, of
Yes.
course, no longer in existence, but um,
Wow.
with the newspaper. And then I also wrote for the Dallas Morning News before I even got to college and
Wow.
started my program. My initial studies in college were journalism. I wanted to be in news ed. Um, so I think that was probably the most beneficial to
Mhm.
me.
So, how did you go from news ed or like wanting to go into journalism to teaching?
Well, I always felt like I was a teacher, and I always felt like, if that's ever presented to me as an opportunity, that I should probably consider it.
Mhm.
I guess what it was, so I went to the University of North Texas. I namely went there because it wasn't far from home. It was relatively inexpensive at the time, and they had a program. Their journalism program was well known. And when I got there, I was honestly very bored in a lot of the 101 classes that I had to take because I'd already had all this previous experience.
Right.
And I got through a couple of classes and I was like, what am I doing? I felt like I was wasting my time. And, like I already felt like I was a good writer and that I knew how to put a story together. And I felt like I was wasting my time and wasting my tuition. And at the same time, I was working on a minor in Spanish, which I then decided maybe it needed to be a double major. And the more classes I took, the more I really, really loved it. And it wasn't so much about improving my Spanish and being able to, speak fluently and write fluently, but it was just all the different things I was learning that I'd never learned before about history and literature and all of that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I switched gears, and I look back on that and it was kind of scary at the time, but I just went straight ahead. And then I ended up staying because I think once you get in that and then you're like, okay, am I going to graduate and go find a job, or am I going to go get my master's? And I had older cousins that were teachers that were encouraging me. And they said, if you can get your master's now, you should just do it. So I stayed in school and finished my master's degree. And then came out of that because they let the graduate students could teach the lower level classes.
Oh,
So I already had some teaching experience and exposure, and I liked it. And when the opportunity came along to teach in high school, I thought, well, let's give this a try, and it worked out. So here I am now.
that is awesome. 15 years later, still loving
15
it.
years later. Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I always tell the kids that my life dream when I was young was I wanted to work for National Geographic, and I
Ah,
wanted to travel the world and write stories,
yes.
and like that was what I wanted to do. And life just took me in a different path, and I recognized that having the life that I have now would have been very hard had I chosen that path. And I can only imagine. I really feel for people that went into journalism because it is such a mess out there with news sources and vetting, and it's just insipid, and I would not want to be a part of that. So I'm glad that I changed career paths.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with all of that, was there a moment or like, did you just have extreme clarity or were you in prayer about it? Or what really helped you kind of release some of that fear and anxiety and worry of switching and kind of going into this new career option?
Well, I'm actually, you know what? I think that the best example that I can give is when I switched one year from teaching to being a principal. So I had worked at my present school for a couple of years, and the head of the upper school had come to me and said, Lisa, you really should consider going into administration. You're very organized, You're very task oriented. I think you'd be a great leader. And when he told me that, I thought, man, you're crazy. I love teaching. I love being in the classroom. Why would I ever give that up?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought about it and I thought about it, and maybe a year went by, and I went to the administration and I said, I had found a program through Creighton University to get my Catholic school leadership certificate to be able to be a principal at a Catholic school. And I presented it to them and I said, is this something you guys would support me in? And so they paid my tuition, they paid my books. It was amazing. I was so fortunate. And I went through that program and I finished it. And then in 2019, there came a position available for me to be a principal at a parochial school in Oak Cliff near Bishop Arts.
Okay.
And I really didn't want to leave teaching. It wasn't about leaving teaching. It wasn't about leaving teaching or leaving my school or anything like that. It was that I felt a very specific pull and draw to do that kind of work, even if I didn't fully understand what all that entailed. And, so I went into it in May of 2019. I was actually still under contract with my, the school that I was at. And my administration was very generous, and they knew that the school that I was going to was struggling with a lot of things, and they really needed some leadership. So after I finished teaching my classes, I would go there in the afternoons and do whatever I needed to do. And so I had that job, and it was very, very difficult. It was hard to manage. I was easily working 60 hours a week. I didn't have a strong support network there. It was a very small school. It was very under-resourced, and it had a lot of problems. It had over half of its staff turnover, enrollment issues, financial problems. It was a really bad situation that I was walking into. And I had some people that were very helpful, and that got me through those initial months. But as the year dragged on, there were a lot of things that happened that made me really question the decision that I had taken. And so, there were things that happened that I would talk to the superintendent and they would tell me, oh, that's the kind of stuff that happens to a principal once in a lifetime. And I'm like, okay, you've told me that 4 or 5 times this year. So what is the deal? Like, do I have a target on my back, or what is going on? And, the longer that I worked there, the more that I realized the different dynamics that were at work. The school was $1 million in debt. It was,
Oh, wow.
It was way more than what I fully realized. So I did the best I could. I tried to create, a happy environment for the teachers. I tried to make sure the parents knew that I was there to love and take care of their children. And, but by December of 2019, I was done. I was so done. I had terrible anxiety. I couldn't sleep. It was bad. And I would come home on Friday afternoons and I would just, we'd go grocery shopping at Aldi, and I'd pick up a bottle of wine and I'd be like, well, that's my Friday night. Because I just couldn't, I was like, this is not healthy.
Yeah.
And, come to find out, the person that they had hired to replace me as a teacher at the other school had quit. He had submitted his resignation in December. And so I informed, my superiors. I said, I want out of my contract. I'm done. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. And I felt really bad about that. But at the same time, I knew what I was capable of. Like, this was too much. Yeah. And my other school was willing to hire me back. They were like, as soon as you can start, please come teach. We love you, And so in the very last week of February 2020 was my last week as a principal. And then 3 weeks later was when the world went crazy. And I just remembered thinking, thank you, God, because there was no way I was going to be running a school in a pandemic and educating my children at home and taking care of my husband, who was considered an essential worker and had to be out in all this. So, God's provision on my life is incredible. And Yeah. I mean, I'm so blessed. The person actually that took my principal position had been principal of the school in the 90s.
Oh, wow.
Her husband had had a health crisis in November or December, and it made it all the more easier for her to realize, hey, I need to switch gears from what I'm doing. This is probably the right thing for me to go into. So it was one of those things where it was like,
Hmm.
you could just visualize this door is opening for you and this door is closing, and this door is opening for her and this door is closing. And it was one of those moments where, even though again I felt this incredible guilt because I felt like I was just ditching ship, and
Yeah.
some people might say that, but at the same time I could kind of see it all, and I realized that sometimes God calls us to do things and that we're afraid to do them, but we think we know what he's calling us to. We think, oh, well, this is my career now. This is my job now. And what we don't realize is we might be called for a specific time and in a specific way, not the way that we think.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
That is a
that's a
million
lot. I
percent.
know.
Yeah. No, but what you just said, like, just finished it nail on the head. Exactly. And I think a lot of times, especially me, that's where I'm honestly having the biggest struggles right now is I feel like I'm praying for clarity and for wisdom, and I'm in a season of waiting, much like David in the Bible, waiting to become, king and replace Saul. And it's like I'm in the season of waiting, and it's confusing sometimes because you're like, well, I hear this. Could that be God? Or is that just my own thoughts and my own timetable? So I think very much so that God does call us to certain things, and we have special gifts for a reason, but it may not always be on our timeline.
Right. And I waited, talking about waiting. I had my certification and I waited over a year. I put in my applications. I interviewed for other positions. I mean, I just remembered thinking like, Lord, like, where are you sending me? Because I thought it was here and I thought it was here and I thought it was here. And what is this? And then later come to find out, well, that's where you needed me. Okay, Lord, like, oh gosh. But if you don't mind, I'll share a tidbit as well about my life. So I got married pretty young. I was 22,
Mhm.
almost 23. I look back on that now as an old woman and go, oh my gosh, you're so young. Um, and we just wanted a family, and so, you think you're just going to have a family. You think you're just going to get pregnant. You think you're just going to have babies. And then you realize there's this other side of things that nobody really tells you about. And nobody talks about, you know what, you might not just get pregnant. You might not just be able to have a baby. And even though you're young, it's something you might take for granted. And it was right before my 24th birthday. We had all these tests done, and come to find out, the fertility specialist that I saw said, that I really needed to try IVF or IUI, and that, I had maybe a 10% chance of conceiving naturally. And I just remember coming out of that appointment just like somebody had just kicked me in the stomach, because I was so young. And I just remembered thinking, okay, IVF is not for us. That's not on the table. This other thing he's talking about, well, maybe, I don't know, and infertility is such a horrible, horrible thing to go through, because even when you have supportive and well-meaning friends and family, they don't always know what to say. And there's all kinds of things they say, like, hey, sometimes we have to wait, or it's all in God's timing or God's plan. And your ears don't want to hear that. You don't want to process that. And a couple of months later, I was in a prayer group with a friend of the family, and she said to me, Lisa, have you actually asked God for a child? Like, have you really sat and prayed very specifically? And I remembered thinking, no, not really, I guess. And I printed out the scripture from Philippians that talks about presenting your petitions to God with praise and thanksgiving. And I printed it out and I put it on the wall where I would see it every day. And lo and behold, by November of that year, I was pregnant with my first child. And I never thought it would happen. And we had the same kind of issue come up again when we were trying to have another one. And it was the same kind of message from the doctors, like, you really should consider XYZ. And I just was very adamant, like, no, 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 this is not for me. And the same kind of thing happened. A few months later, I found myself pregnant with my second child. So I'm very blessed that I didn't have to go through I have a cousin that, had to do injections and everything. Like, I am so blessed that I didn't have to go through that in order to get the children that I have. So I very much empathize with women that have to hear other people say, well, it's in God's timing or it's in God's plan, because while that is true, it is a really, really hard thing to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's another thing. That's another thing I went through where I look back now and I still have that printout. It's in my kitchen, it's in my cabinet. It's from 2008 and it's still, right there. And I look at it every now and then. I remember whenever I'm going through something that's my direction.
Yeah, that's very good and very wise counsel too. Like, did you pray specifically about this? Like, really hone in on your prayer and ask God, detailed prayer of what you're wanting or needing or whatever. So yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
Very good friend.
Which I was reminded of when I got the position and I was struggling and it was terrible. And it was so hard because I would go into work and I would expend all my energy loving on my faculty and making sure they had what they needed and doing everything I could. And at the end of the day, I was just so spent, And when I was thinking, okay, I need to quit this and I need to transition back to teaching, my prayers would come back to me and I would remember that I did not pray to be happy. I did not pray to be there for 5 years. I did not pray anything like that. What I prayed was, God, send me where you need me, where I will be most needed. So that comes back to me every now and then. Praying very specifically is really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I love that Bible verse with prayer and petition. Mm-hmm. Bring your request to the Lord. Love it. Yeah. And like IVF and trying to get pregnant and all those things, I feel like it's very similar with anything. Like with grief, I was talking with another mom for another episode, and it's the same thing. Like when you're walking through grief or you're walking through IVF or you're walking through these different trials, sometimes I know that a lot of people have the best intention, but like you said, we don't want to hear it in those moments. It's really hard to say, well, like when someone passes away, well, they're in heaven now, so they're in a better place. It's like, yeah, but I want them here. Like, you're not sympathizing with me and you're not sitting here with me and feeling what I'm feeling. You're just trying to put a Band-Aid on it, which I don't need right now. And I think that's very similar to kind of probably what you were feeling too. You just wanted someone to sit with you and be in it and feel it instead of trying to just pat your back and push you along,
Right. Because I think it's, again, like you were saying, it's all in good intentions. And I think the best thing people can say is just, I'm here for you. I might not understand what people are, I might not understand what you're feeling or what you're going through, but I love you. And, I am here to listen and what have you. And, that's challenging too, especially with the world today, because we don't necessarily, we're not getting together as much. We don't see as many people maybe. And it's, physical presence. There's not a replacement for that. No amount of Zoom chats or whatever, like it's never going to replace it. But that's my number one go-to whenever I know somebody's going through a crisis. It's, I love you. I am here for you. If I can do anything, I will. But I usually keep it kind of to that,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm noticing too, with everything that's been going on, not only is physical and being close to somebody important, hugs and just being near somebody, but also having a conversation. I think we've been so pushed out of that in recent months, years of just texting instead of actually picking up a phone and calling someone and hearing their voice. And it is just like, that's what God made us for. He made us for community. And we are getting slowly pushed out of that. And it's really, really sad. And it's challenging to stay in it,
Yeah. And there's much that could be said about that. I was just talking to someone yesterday about, the workforce and people are hiring, but nobody's wanting to work and what have you. And I made the comment, a lot of it is whoever the primary caregiver is in the home, which tends to be the woman, if they have quit their second job or, their part-time job because they have to stay home with the children, or they have to homeschool the children, or whatever it is, like those people are not coming back to the workforce anytime soon. And as much as we want them just to like show up again, they have obligations, primarily, primary obligations to their family. And that is just one little snapshot of how this pandemic has revealed the fragmentation of our society into these little silos, instead of, that village concept of supporting one another. And I mean, I get this from, I can feel this from you when you're talking, that we need that. And it is sacred, and it should be treasured to take care of your tribe.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just one of the ways too, I feel that our adversary is working against us. He is doing everything possible to keep us isolated and away. And through isolation, we start getting, more and more depressed, or more anxious, or more fearful. And all of these things start bubbling up inside of us because we're not in community, and we don't have other believers to walk along with that can encourage us. So I think it's just sad.
It is sad. I mean, people's churches closed, or, services moved remote. I mean, things are better now, but I mean, is that temporary? I don't know. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm Catholic. So the bishop had made this decree. Okay, it's time to come back to mass. Make sure you come back this Sunday, the 15th. That's the day. And then just a couple of days ago, it was, okay, hold up. Just kidding. Yeah. And what being a part of a church community is vital, I think. And when you feel like you can't necessarily go, or if you have questions about going because maybe you can't get the vaccine, or your children can't get the vaccine, whatever it is, it's very dangerous. Yes. And that's why we have to keep our prayer life going, even in times that is challenging. And we have to encourage our children with, encouraging words. And we have to take care of our home, our domestic church, right? Our church at home, and make sure we're still speaking Bible verses, or even just, putting on music, Christian music, or whatever it is, making sure that you're still keeping that alive, so that the Holy Spirit can do what it needs to do. And it's a part of your life. And so the enemy is not, overshadowing everything.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And like it says in Genesis, when God was talking to Cain, and he was like, get a hold of this, because Satan, the enemy, sin is crouching at the door. So wrangle that in, pay attention to it, pay attention to your jealousy, to your anger, whatever feeling that you have. And like I teach my boys, it's okay to have feelings, feel that feeling, name it, and give it to God. Like, that's what we all have to do. And, again, we're going to continue struggling with the same things because we are sinners and we fall short of the glory of God. However, he walks with us through it, and he always is forgiving and merciful. So I have another question for you. Has there been another time in your life where you have seen God to be faithful and to carry you through difficult or challenging times, or just, something a little different?
Oh, goodness. Gosh, I mean, I can think of several instances when I was younger, when I would be struggling with whether it was self-esteem or feeling inadequate, and just, laying my heart out there and feeling like there was an answer back. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I know that's a little bit vague. Another thing, okay, perhaps, is I have participated for the last 12 years in a mission trip program with the Diocese of Dallas, traveling to Central America. Obviously, it hasn't happened in the last couple of years, but I took groups of students down pretty much from 2008. I had to take time off in between pregnancies. But going down there and being able to be, detached from the modern world and focused just on people and making connections with people has always been very good for my spirit, and it had never failed that I would go on a trip and get the answer to something I needed the answer to. Yeah. And whether it was, I remember distinctly one trip, my oldest daughter was very young. She was probably 2 or 3 years old. And, as your first go around as a parent, I was very impatient. And I still hadn't learned, if your kid just can't get it out, whatever it is that they're trying to talk about, because they want to tell you a story that goes like this,
Yes.
like sometimes that's okay. Eventually there's a developmentally appropriate phase where they realize they have to like get it in.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I was inside of a church, and I was with a group of my students and some other youngsters, and we were making friendship bracelets and braiding them and putting beads on and all this stuff. And I'm not particularly good at that, so I was just doing the best that I could. And I remembered there was this one little girl, and I was making a bracelet for her, and like no matter what I did, I would make it and it would be too short and it wouldn't tie on her wrist. And I'd be like, sorry, I have to start again. And I did this maybe 2 or 3 times, and I got so frustrated. And I remembered when we went back to our dormitories that night, and we always would have like circle time to share about our day. That was the one thing that God put on my heart. Like, why were you so frustrated? Why you're making a little kid a friendship bracelet? Like, why is this the thing that sets you off? And again, this was, goodness, 10 years ago, but I can think back on that and go, God was speaking to me through that person, through that moment. And I have several other instances like that. And yeah, that's just another example.
Mm-hmm. And through that, like reminding you to be patient and, to take a breath during that moment.
Yeah. Like, this is not serious. What are you doing?
Yeah.
There's some things in life that are very important. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that really aren't that important in the bigger picture.
Right. Hey friends, would you do me a favor? Would you subscribe to the show by clicking that subscribe button wherever you're listening? It makes a huge difference for the Go and Tell podcast community. I would also love for you to share this show with a friend. I know some of you found this show because a friend recommended it to you, so thank you for listening and being here, for subscribing and sharing and showing all your love and support. Thank you. I also want to use this time to share my very favorite sparkling water that I have been drinking recently. It is Mad Tasty. It has 20 milligrams of broad spectrum hemp extract, 0 sugar. All the sweeteners is infused from natural fruit essence. They're under 15 calories per can, gluten-free, vegan, and there are now 4 delicious flavors that are just so yummy. So if you go to madtasty.com, you can use my code LaurenG10 for 10% off your order. So go to Mad Tasty, that's MADTASTY.com, and use my code Lauren, LaurenG10 for 10% off. Music was created for the show by Matt Bowen, and I'm your host, Lauren Greci. Now let's rejoin the conversation. When you mentioned that you would go on these mission trips and your daughter was young, speak to the mom who wants to go on a mission trip but feels that they can't because they have a young child.
Well, I think that I was fortunate in that I had gone on one in 2008, and that was before she was born. Well, I mean, before we even conceived her. And so when I went, I was struggling with, am I ever going to have a child? And so at least I got to have that experience so that when she did turn 2, I had a husband that could be at home and spend the whole week with her. So that was very important. But I think I knew that what I felt and experienced in that trip before she was born was something I needed again in my life. And so if I had never done it, then maybe I would have been more hesitant. And let me tell you that, of course, that first trip was hard. I mean, I bawled. And then when I had to leave 2 at home, oh my gosh, like I was a mess the first couple nights, I'd hold it together. Again, I do this thing. I hold it, a lot of women do this. We hold it together. And then at the end of the day, it's like, I'm done, but not an easy thing at all. But if you really, really feel it on your heart, if God is opening that door to you, if you see, if somebody comes to your church and they're talking about it and you're like, that could be me. Or if somebody gives you a pamphlet, or if you see a commercial or a YouTube video or whatever it is, that's usually how it starts, whatever the call is. And if you come back to it and you feel like it's something like, Lord, is that door open for me? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Pray about it and think about it. And I think God will find a way for you to be able to do that. I'm not going to say, oh, it's easy leaving your kids. What are you talking about? Because it is very, very hard. But I think that if it is something you're being called to do, if you're prayerful about it, if you have the right support at home to take care of your children so that you feel okay about it, then I say absolutely do it, because it was one of the best things I ever did in my life. And it really enriched my faith. So
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in going on mission trips, and the kind of mission trips we do. We don't necessarily go to a town and say, hey, we're going to build this for you.
Mhm.
What we do with the youth is we take them down there and we have them interact with the youth that are there. And then we say, usually the planning starts several months out. We say, what do you guys need help with? And sometimes it's, our church really needs a latrine. Can you help us with the construction of that? And they raise the funds. They take care of that. We just provide a little extra labor and support in that sense.
Mhm.
So it's not like we're a bunch of gringos going down there and, oh, we're going to build this marvelous thing for you, and there you go. No, we
Mhm.
do it together, as, to support the community, to show that we're there out of love and that we want them to be successful and to have what they need. So yeah, if you have a call on your heart to do mission work, there is a specific reason for it. And I really encourage anyone that thinks that they need to do it, that they pursue their options.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was beautifully said. And again, going back to what we were saying, just another aspect that the devil is working to keep us confined again and preventing mission trips, overseas and all these other things. I mean, things are opening up a little better and we're having more and more opportunities arising. But man, yeah,
But the situation, I mean, our situation in certain parts of the country is pretty bad.
yeah.
And but it's even worse in a lot of these other countries. I keep tabs with people that I've met over the years, and, they don't have access to vaccines at all. Or, hospital care, even in the best of times, is not even close to what we have available to us. So, that perspective that's been really hard throughout the pandemic. Yeah, that's been really hard to touch base with them and say, how are you doing? Oh, we can't leave our homes at all. The police are monitoring the streets. So, you can
Wow.
only go out if your last name is A to H.
Wow.
It's like, oh, like that's their lockdown. Or um, you're talking about people that can barely afford their groceries week to week. So if they can't work, they can't get food. And if they can't get food, how do they feed their children? Or, there's a lot of things that come up that I think the average American doesn't think about, that people in other countries are experiencing this pandemic in a much different way, which is why all the more that we have to pray that we can see an end to this, because while we might be inconvenienced, there are people who this is life and death. And not because they got COVID. It's life and death because they don't have food to feed their children. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a hard thing to see from
Mhm.
afar and not be able to do anything about, which again is another way that we're told, well, we're powerless to this. And it's like, no, we're not powerless to this, but we'd certainly have to pray for one another, and hope that this can be resolved as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a good insight too, that I think I needed to hear that too. Of, we get so here in our community and where we live is very um wealthier, if you
Yeah,
will. It's a
affluent. Yeah, yeah.
very, affluent community, towns, cities around us. And a lot of people don't necessarily think of those things and how else everybody else in the world is experiencing things. And unfortunately, too, even with the news, they're going to show more of the populated cities, right? Showing like Paris, France, or, the like Beijing or all of these areas, but they're not going to those impoverished smaller towns that are really, really struggling. Like you said, we
Right.
don't see that.
Right. When you meet people who depend on a wood stove to cook their meals, and they can't get out of their house to go get firewood, or maybe they can get out that day, but it rained, so the firewood is all wet. So how did, like,
Yeah.
there's just this whole other layer of understanding when you've, and again, this goes back to me encouraging people to go out and do mission and see how other people live. And this isn't just, I'm always very, it's always very important to me to mention that it's not about doing mission in third world countries. You can do mission in the United States. There are people living in abject poverty in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And we often just turn a blind eye to that because, like you said, we're in an affluent area. Like who's starving in Dallas? Well, North Texas Food Bank could tell you who's starving in Dallas. Like there are people living in abject poverty in spite of our wealth. And it's always something that we have to remember, and we so easily forget. And that's why getting out of this bubble is really important. So if God puts a call on your heart to get out of here, really consider the call.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are a lot of food banks here. I mean, I've seen it. I think the North Texas Giving Day is a really great opportunity that we're kind of like slapped in the face with it and shown like the stats about like the North Texas Food Bank in particular, like you mentioned. And especially with COVID, that put a huge damper on it. People were not getting food in the food banks. And then so because of that, like you said, it just trickles down. Now a mom can't get food for her kid and her kid doesn't eat and they only eat during the school day. And there are so, like, let's talk about that. There are so many kids that only eat the free, the free and reduced lunch. Like get breakfast and lunch, and then they don't even get dinner until the next day when they go back to school. And then the weekends they go hungry and then think summer, Yeah.
Hunger is a big problem in our community. So I mean, if anybody doesn't know this, you can give monthly to the North Texas Food Bank. They will debit your account, whether it's $5 or $20 or whatever you can do. And so that's something that we've done for several years because it's not always feasible to, like sometimes you forget to bring in your canned food, or sometimes you forget to go drop it off at XYZ. And that's a really easy way to support them and know that, okay, like I did that this month and I was able to help them. So I live in Carrollton, and one of the local charities here, food banks here, is MetroCrest Services. And something that my daughter and I did earlier this year was we collected food from just our block, just our neighborhood. I put out back in January, I put out a flyer. I said, I'll come by, I introduced myself and I said, I'll come by every Saturday if you have a couple cans or cereal or whatever that you want to donate. And then on Monday, I will drop it off at MetroCrest. And we did that almost until Easter. And then I will admit it kind of died down because at first we had a lot of contributions, and then eventually it was really just this like one house in the corner, and God bless them. They had a cross on their door. So I was like, okay, but it got to the point where, I was having to miss collection because of a soccer game, or I was feeling torn from it. But I mean, there are small things that we can do to fight hunger in our community. And I think that that's one of those things I'm passionate about, is making sure people have housing and making sure that they have food, because all human beings deserve to have that. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did. And even with our life group at our church is just an option to even mention to your church or your church group or your friends or your ladies Bible study, whoever it may be. We took a date night for our life group. Our church provides childcare on those nights, so the life group can get together, and everyone brought certain items, and we made little sack lunches basically for kids for summer, for the ones that didn't have any food. And we just made like an assembly line, and we just threw things in a bag and on down it went and tied it and then delivered it. And it was just one evening. Like if we could all do that, like just think about the difference that we could make. So I know you have an appointment coming up, and I just looked, it's already ticking away.
Okay. I'm actually, so I know you said it was a doctor's appointment. It's actually I'm going to do an escape room.
Oh, fun.
Because I'm in charge of mentoring the new teachers. Whenever we have new faculty or staff at my school, I kind of help them get acclimated and answer their questions. And we wanted to do a team bonding activity because we didn't get to do anything last year.
Right.
And so I made it a point to tell my admin, like, hey, we need to do something. This is an idea I have. And he was totally supportive. And I said, great. So that's what we're doing. So it's not like a doctor's appointment or anything. Yeah. But that'll be my fun thing I'm doing this afternoon.
Oh, I love it.
It'll either be great or horrible. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
Do you know like what the theme is going to be?
So it's North Texas escape rooms.
Okay.
The theme of the room is jailhouse, and we're doing they have a 45-minute version and a 60-minute version. So it has a couple more puzzles you have to solve. And I never thought I was going to get into escape rooms. I thought, man, that is like some nerdy stuff. And my sister and my brother-in-law, they do all kinds of things. They're very creative people. And they got into escape rooms several years ago, and they actually make props for for a few of the different escape rooms in the area. And they're cool. I just love to watch them design things and think about them and figure out, okay, we want this thing to be this size and do XYZ, and like the creative process. I mean, they're amazing. But I used to be like, no, I'll never do that. I'll never do that. But yeah, here I am taking a group of people to do it. So it's kind of fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. I have yet to do an escape room.
Okay, gotta do it.
I know we've had opportunities to do it, and then it's just never like went through. So I don't know. A part of me, as much as I really want to do it, I think I'm kind of scared to be locked in a room with people.
Yeah. Well, if you do it with a small group, and you might even ask like, what's the size of the room, so that you don't feel, because some people might feel claustrophobic.
Yeah.
But that's what you think. You think like you're going to get literally locked into like a jail cell, and like the AC is going to kick off and the walls are going to go like this.
They're going to start slamming on you.
That's not what's happening. And there's so many places out there. So I would just encourage you to read reviews, but, there's so many different themes, and it's just kind of, it's kind of a fun thing. If you have a ladies group, or if you do that date night thing with couples, I would encourage you just to get together with maybe one or two other couples and just go experience it.
Yes, I know we will. And I want to say that our life group did do it once, I think, for a date night, but my husband and I didn't do it. We were like, oh, yeah, we were both like a little nervous about it.
We're going to get locked.
We'll have to try it.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel a little better about it now. So I think we'll have to try this at some point. But okay. So the two questions to wrap up the podcast recording is, what are you reading, and what is making you laugh? Or no, what are you loving? Let's start that over. So two questions that I asked at the end of the podcast is, what are you reading and what are you loving?
Okay. So I actually have my book with me. Perfect. So I am reading A Lineage of Grace by Francine Rivers.
I love Francine Rivers.
So I had no idea who she was. And okay, I usually read a couple of books a year. At least one of those will be a novel in Spanish. And then sometimes I'll read historical fiction, and that's the kind of stuff I usually enjoy. And so I don't usually read a lot by Christian authors, especially not Christian fiction. And so my coworker actually gave this to me. And then I also read her book, Redeeming Love.
Yeah, that's the only one I've read, but I liked it.
I didn't love that because I'm not like a romance novel person, and it was a little too romance novel for me. And it wasn't necessarily my thing, but this is really cool. And it goes through the different women of the Bible. I'm on the very last section, which is Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay. And it just kind of tells things from their perspective. And then at the end of the story, it has, I think it's meant to be done in a ladies group.
Okay.
And so it has questions for reflection and different things like that. So I really enjoyed this because like there's the story of Ruth. And if you want to know more about her and what that was all about, but I just have to get through the very last section on Mary, but that's what I'm reading.
That is cool. So based on your reading choices, have you read American Dirt yet?
No, I haven't.
Have you heard about it?
No.
Okay. You need to read it. You need to read it. It's more of let's just say it could be a true story. Put it there. It's not based on a real character or her son, but it very well could be. Okay. And it's a mother and a son who are escaping Mexico and drug lords and things of that nature. And it's their journey across the border. And it's powerful. It is so good. And it just kind of opened an eye too about like what people are really experiencing at the border too. I know that she got a lot of backlash because it became a political thing, but it's not really a political thing. I don't, I think people, we
Right.
tend to look to things a little too much and read into things. But if you read it subjectively and just read it like, it's a mother and her son and it's their experience, like it's really good. It's a good book.
That reminds me of another book. I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but it's called Enrique's Journey. But that was written maybe in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So it's been around for a while, but it's actually based on a true story of a young man that basically escapes Honduras and rides the train to get to the United States. And so it's all about his journey of getting sent back and deported several times just to get to his mom, because he's been separated from his mom, I think from the time he was 6 or 8 years old. I can't remember exactly. But I'm familiar with that kind of story. So yeah, I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Okay, so what are you loving?
So I have really been enjoying exploring Netflix more than I ever have in my life. And I think that I never was much one, for that. I didn't watch a lot of TV, but this last summer was like, let me just go through everything possible on Netflix. And so I started watching Madam Secretary because one night I watched Spanglish, which I had seen before, but a long time ago. And I remembered thinking, okay, what else has Tia Leone been in that I might know? And of course, Madam Secretary came up. And so I've been watching that. And then the other one that I started watching was Designated Survivor. Both of those shows are so intense. And like, sometimes I'm a little bit disengaged when I watch it because it's like, well, who's trying to blow up what now? But that has been lately. That's been what I've been watching. I don't know if I'm going to continue because it is really intense.
Yeah, we started watching Designated Survivor and really loved it. And then I think maybe about season 2, or if there's 3 seasons.
That's kind of where I am.
I think we kind of we just haven't watched it in a while. We've kind of dropped off the train because it's just like, okay, it's like now the same plot over and over, it seems. It's like the same storyline almost, just repeating in a different way. And yeah, I'm sure it ends beautifully and there's probably, more to it. We just need to either finish it or I don't know. But
that's kind of like, because I watched Manifest too, because that was the thing that everybody was into at the beginning of summer.
Yeah.
And as I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. All right, what's happening? And then I got about halfway through it and I'm like, this is like Lost, all over again. And there's some really crazy shows out there right now. And I just don't know. And maybe it's because we have the ability to be able to just watch as many episodes as we want at one time. And maybe that takes away the appeal. But anyway, there's some intense stuff.
Yeah. My favorite show that I had finished that surprised myself was The Crown, because I'm not like a huge, I never was into, what's the other thing on, what's the other British?
Downton Abbey?
Yes. So I never got into that. But I watched The Crown, and the first 3 or 4 episodes, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm going to hang in there though. And it just got so good. And I'm like now anxiously waiting, like, when is it coming back? When is it coming back?
Yeah. I enjoyed that show a whole lot. I also like Call the Midwife. And I'm trying to think of some other shows but I love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know, especially with it ending with Princess Diana, not even further into her, it was still relatively new. She had just come on the scene and then it stops. And I was like, wait, we need more. Yes. So that was a good show. Well, Lisa, if you could say anything else, or if you want to end on a specific note or anything, tips, advice, or just your final last word, is there anything that you want to share?
Well, I mean, just to kind of wrap it up, just pray without ceasing, because I think having a relationship with God, especially at this moment, is really important.
Yes.
And just being in regular communication with him, and whether that's to express sadness or that you're upset about something, or to offer gratitude, we're supposed to offer gratitude, and sometimes we forget. I think that that would be the only thing that I would just leave with.
Yeah, Absolutely. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time and for all your wisdom and just sharing your story with everybody. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you for listening to the Go and Tell podcast with Lauren Greci. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe, comment, leave a review, and share with your friends. Music was created for the show by Matt Bowen, and I'm your host, Lauren Greci. I'll be back here next week with another great conversation. Thanks for listening today, friends.